My name is Kathleen Hernandez. I'm an application engineer here with TriStar, and we are continuing our webinar series, and we're going to be discussing Mathcad today, specifically Mathcad Prime 3.1. That is currently the latest and greatest version that is out, and we're going to focus on the interface, and here is Mathcad. And we can definitely extend some of these webinar topics with Mathcad, maybe integrating with Creo and or SolidWorks. I know a lot of you guys on this audience might not be using different CAD tools. You don't have to be using those CAD tools in order to use Mathcad. So we're going to be focusing on Mathcad standalone, and I'll be showing you some resources that you'll have available to you after this. So I'll have some links. My email address will be at the end of the presentation, so if you want a copy of this slide deck, feel free to reach out to me. There'll be some links in there. This webinar will also be recorded and placed on TriStar's website, along with the other webinar topics that we've been discussing within Creo, and such as Simulate or Advanced Assembly. We've got some wind chill topics on there as well. I know we've got a reporting topic coming up in a few weeks that's a lot of people have been registering for. So feel free to go onto TriStar's website and take a look at some of the past presentations and upcoming webinars that you might find interesting to you. And before I get going, I do want to talk about some of the TLOs that are out there. 35% on PTC Creo Simulate. So if you're doing any kind of FEA, this is formerly known as Mechanica, for those of you who have been in the PTC ecosystem for a couple of years. It was called Mechanica previously. It's now called Creo Simulate. Same tool, different name, enhanced a little bit. As versions come out, it gets better and better. They've got some training. If you're interested in any training, there might be some discounts on that, whether it's within Creo, Windchill, Mathcad. So, training is always good. And Mathcad, 36%. So, if this is something that you're interested in after seeing this demo, let us know, and we'll see if we can hook you up. Okay, and TriStar is going to be at PTC's LiveWorks in 2016. So if you're interested in attending, that's happening, let me see, it looks like in June 6th to the 9th in Boston. So looks like it'll be a good time. So today we got a short allocated time, got 30 minutes. We might go a little over, we might be a little under, but we're shooting for 30 minutes, so nice and short. But I want to talk about the Mathcad overview, what are the challenges in engineering calculations, and how can Mathcad help? And I'll jump right into a live demo where I'll discuss the interface and natural math notation and units awareness, the documentation capabilities, and integration with third-party tools. And I'm going to focus a little discussion on Excel at a very high-level overview. I could spend an hour just talking on integrating with Excel. And then we'll open it up at the end for questions and answers. There is a little chat section within the GoToMeeting panel. Feel free to jot your questions in there, and we'll review them at the end. So how are you capturing your engineering calculations today? Are you using any tools? Maybe you're using pencil and paper and jotting it down. Referencing different websites or reference manuals. Maybe you're doing your engineering calculations in Excel, which Excel is a very powerful tool. And believe it or not, Excel is our biggest competitor, which surprised me when I found that out. I would have thought it would have been another math tool, when Really, it's Excel, because Excel, everybody has Excel. Everybody has that spreadsheet, and it's very, very powerful. And I don't want to say that Mathcad can replace Excel, because I love Excel myself. Excel is a very powerful tool, but it's very hard to audit. You know, what is this answer in D24? Oh, well, D24 is the summation of A1 to A10, you know, in times B4, and you kind of have to go through that worksheet to audit it. And I want Mathcad to complement Excel. I want us to use the right tool for the right job. So that's why I'm going to be spending a little bit of time at the end talking about integrating with Excel, using the right tool for the right job. But if you're using paper calculations or, you know, tribal knowledge, you know, it's kind of hard to duplicate and reuse this over and over again, and it's one of the benefits that Mathcad has. So, you know, if you're using tribal knowledge or different worksheets, you might have to go back and do iterative designs and test and go back and tweak it and test, and you might have to go over and over again. But if we have a proven mathematical sequence that we can apply, then we don't have to reinvent the wheel over again. Okay, so we can prevent loss of IP and improve knowledge capture. It's very easily read in the way we've learned it in school with the natural math notation. You don't need to know any kind of scripted code or anything like that. So we're not imposing a skill set on the reader or on the author. Okay, so they've really worked from previous versions of Mathcad. And I'm mentioning this because I might have some people on the call who are familiar with version Mathcad 15 and before. So version 13, 14, 15, all of those were very similar. And then PTC came out with Mathcad Prime. So Prime 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and I'm currently working in 3.1. So they've really taken to the ribbon interface and the ease of use, so the engineer or the author of the document can work on the calculations and not working with the interface of Mathcad. You know, so it's pretty intuitive, and we can bring in documentation and math and plots, and we can very easily reuse this data. So let me come in here and just go right into the live demonstration. I kind of like showing you guys the live product. So here is Mathcad Prime 3.1 specifically, and let's first discuss the interface. All right, so we've got the Math tab and everything to do with math. Whether I'm bringing in some text, we've got math, different operators and symbols like Greek symbols. There are shortcuts for a lot of these things. And as you're utilizing some of these different arguments, you'll see a little symbol at the end. So that's the open curly bracket. That's the shortcut for this arrow if you're ever inside of programming. Okay? And a lot of the Greek symbols work the same way. If you knew the Roman equivalent and then press Control G, that'll make it into a Greek character. Okay? You don't need to memorize all of those shortcuts if you don't want to. The more you use them, the more you'll remember them. But there is a keyboard shortcut printout that you can print out if you'd like. Okay, so we've got different symbolics. We can manipulate the units in here. The Input-Output tab would allow us to input data from, let's say, Excel, but we could also convert old documents, and I'm saying Mathcad 15 or 14, we can convert them into Prime. You will not be able to open them up directly. They have to go through this converter, and I'll discuss that a little bit towards the end of the presentation. We have a Functions tab for all these different categories of functions. We can also click on All Functions, and it'll open up on the left-hand side. So it displays it a little bit differently, and you can search for a specific function that you're looking for. We have the Matrices and Table tab because we can do matrix math or insert tables. You know, if you're into linear algebra, you know, cross product, dot product, and eigenvalues and vectors and all that stuff, then you can definitely use this matrix, and you can very easily manipulate the tables and or matrices or an array. Mathcad uses those two terms interchangeably, but you can very easily manipulate that data. We have a plots tab where we can insert a plot, you know, whether it's a 2D plot or a 3D plot if you'd like, and you can have multiple traces on a single plot. And once we have a plot active, you can manipulate that particular plot. Oh, let's come in here and start. Let's show something. Let's define f of x. Let's define f of x to be, so anytime I have the colon equals, that's the definition statement. Okay, so let's define it to be, let's do the sign of x, just the sign of x. So if we create a plot, so I can either insert an XY plot, but the hotkey is Control-2. Do you see that in the label when I'm hovering over XY plot? So if I were to come over here and just say Control-2, it'll bring in this particular trace. And you can always move it wherever you want. Just it won't recognize it if you move it above the function, because Mathcad reads from left to right, top down. So you can reorder stuff, but if you're above the definition statement, it won't work. So let's put f of x over here and x down here, and you'll see we have our trace. And as soon as I activate this particular plot, then we can come in here and manipulate it. Let's define g of x. Let's define g of x to be the cosine of x. And so I'm going to come in here, we'll add a trace, and let's plot g of x. So now we have two traces on this single plot. And if I hover over, if I select g of x, anything I manipulate is manipulating g of x, you know, whether it's the color or the thickness. You know, maybe I want to add a symbol in here if I wanted to. Okay, so you can manipulate the look and feel of this particular plot. Whether or not we want to show the plot background, you know, if it's transparent, so you'll see the engineering look and feel in the background, or if we want a white background. Oops, let's select the plot in order to change it. So when you click away, it'll just have a white background at the end of this trace. So it's very easily to come in here and create different plots. We have math formatting and text formatting, because one of the very powerful aspects of Mathcad is the documentation side of things. Some of you guys in the audience may have done programming, or in Creo we write relations. Isn't it nice when we add comments next to the relations or next to the programming code, not only to remind yourself 6 months down the road what this particular code is doing, but you know, for other users who are going to be reading this. That's the exact same thing in Mathcad, and we have the ability to document our math. And so I just have an example file over here with some really nice headers and footers and images, but it's just coming in here and documenting what each of these different variables represent. And that's very, very powerful, I think in Mathcad, and I think that's one of the things that it might be an opportunity that we have over other math tools. Okay. We've got the calculation tab, where right now auto calculation is turned on, and what that means is if I make any changes to this, so let's divide this by 2. It'll automatically populate and auto-calculate down the page where those values are being used. However, you might have a complicated equation or some complicated worksheets, and you might want to change several variables all at once. Well, instead of waiting, so if I were to change one variable, let's say it takes a little bit of time to regenerate down the worksheet, but I want to change several variables, what I can do is I can stop all calculations, make my changes all at once, and then force the calculate or turn auto calculation back on, and it'll regenerate everything all at once. So for performance reasons, we can turn on and off this auto calculation. And then we have the ability to change some of our worksheet settings. For example, the origin. So the first column and the first cell would be, or the first row would be 0, 0. Well, sometimes you want that to be at 1. So you can change the origin from 0 to 1. All right, so that's one of the things. And this is all stuff that we learn about in training. If you were interested in Mathcad, and we did decide to implement this and go into training, it would be a 2-day class. The first day is probably the stuff you would use 90% of the time to create worksheets and engineering calculations, and then the second day is more advanced, where we talk about differential equations and optimization and solve blocks, you know, regression and linear interpolation. It's a pretty cool class to see. Okay, here's how you use Mathcad, and how can you apply it to some more advanced things. We have a document tab where you can manipulate the look and feel of the document. For example, do we want to show the grid or not? So now I turn the grid off. It's still there in the background. It's still a little magnetic to that grid, but we just don't see it. So if I want to see the grid, is it standard or do I want to see fine? Now this is something I would probably decide on initially, because you can see when I changed it to fine, it kind of smushed everything together. So that's one of those decisions you'd probably want to make at the beginning. Right now I'm in page view. So this is, if I were to print right now, this is what it would look like. But for those of you who know previous versions of Mathcad, you might want to be in draft view. And this is what it looked like. So this is the printable region. You can see the dotted line down the middle. You might put some engineering notes on this side, right? We can very easily go into header mode. So I added this page number onto the top of the header. So you can just click on it and manipulate it. You can add a header. If you click on it again, you're out of header mode. You can put your company logo up here and create a template. So every time you're creating a new document, you've got your company letterhead up here. Footers, same thing. I added the saved date down here. And then resources is where you have a bunch of information, different references, tutorials on how to get started inside of Mathcad. Of course I want you guys to take training, because then I'll get to meet you, and because I'm the trainer for Mathcad from TriStar. But if you don't want to do training, come check out the tutorial, because it's some good stuff in here. We've got the help section, the keyboard shortcuts, but let me tell you, there is a really good Mathcad community out there. And they share their work. I mean, if you have a question, sure, ask me, but if you also ask the community, there's a lot of people out there who are willing to share their knowledge. Okay, we've got the learning connector. If you're connected to PTCU, this would launch PTCU right away. So this is, in a nutshell, the interface. It's a ribbon interface that everything else is going to as well. Okay, let's talk about the natural math notation. If I were to come in here and say, 256 plus 35, what I can do is I can divide that all by 50 if I want to. So we have an obvious numerator, an obvious denominator. If I were to come in here, I didn't mean to say 256, I meant to say 2.56. Everything updates in real time because I have that auto calculation turned on. Okay. If I wanted to come in here and do an integral, if you're into calculus, we've got the natural math notation in here. If you were to save this out into a neutral file format, this would just become an image file, that you can open up in Word. If you're in Mathcad, though, it's in real time. So if I wanted to know the integral from 0 to pi, so I'm going to say P, Control G. So if you know the Roman, Control G, that would give you the Greek letter. So let's do pi over 2 of sine of x dx equals. So I mentioned before the colon equals up above is a definition statement. The regular equals is considered an evaluation statement. So you can evaluate it numerically. Okay, natural math notation. I don't think Excel can do that at this point. But one of the more popular ones, you can also do scalar math. If I define A to be 34, and let's define B to be 25, we can define C to be the square root of A squared plus B squared. And I'm just using my keyboard to type this in, okay? So we've got the square root sign in here. Natural math notation. If I was using Excel, this would teach it the power of 1/2. Well, now I'm assuming that those who are reading this, if they dig into that cell to see what I've typed in, that the power of 1/2 is the same thing as the square root symbol. Right here, we know it's a square root symbol. We learned this in 6th grade, I'm guessing. I would think 6th grade might be around the time where we learned square roots, okay? Another popular thing inside of Mathcad is we can use this explicit keyword. This explicit keyword allows us to show our work. So I want to explicitly show the values of A and B. And when I click away, you'll see we're showing our work. So 34 is the value of A. 25 is the value of B. Okay, so I can move this around if I'd like. You know, if B was really 2.5, we can verify which value of B we're using in this equation. One other thing I want to point out is Mathcad does have some variables that are predefined. So if I were to say C equals, because I didn't define C until right here to be the square root of A squared plus B squared, C by default is the speed of light. Okay, 3 times 10 to the 8 meters per second. But if I were to drag this down to after I've defined C, well, now C is the square root of A squared plus B squared. So remember, Mathcad reads top down, left to right. So you just have to be careful when redefining stuff. But you can see that the C is in green, units are in blue, but once you redefine it, it goes back into the regular font. Right? So I just wanted to make sure I point that out. Let's talk units. If I wanted to add 15 feet plus 6 meters plus 10 furlong plus 5 inches, when I say equals, it recognizes all of these as units of length. All right, let me come in here and let's copy and paste this a couple times. All right, if I were to change meters, let's say I was doing some data entry. I was working with another company who was modernizing all of their documentation. They had these scanned PDFs and they wanted to change it and convert them into Mathcad. So, you know, maybe as they were doing data entry, they accidentally typed S instead of M. Well, Mathcad is not going to erroneously calculate that result. It recognizes that, hey, this is not units compatible. This is seconds, not units of length. So it will recognize that. So that's very powerful. Okay, let's go ahead and change this from S to back to meters. Okay, if I wanted this result, which is in meters, and the reason why it's in meters is my current unit system is set to the SI unit system, but maybe I wanted this result in inches. All I have to do is get rid of meters, type in inches, and it'll automatically convert it into inches. If I wanted to change the entire worksheet, then I would change the unit system. So I've got SI, we've got the US customary, and then we have centimeter gram second. So if I wanted to change this to the US customary, it'll convert the entire worksheet. In this unit system, though, it's of length of feet. The reason why I didn't change this middle one is because I specifically typed in inches. So because I specifically typed in inches, it didn't convert this one because I specifically typed it in. If I wanted to reset it, the way I usually do it is I just reevaluate it to go back to the default. So units are very powerful. There's many different units in here. KIP, you know, for those of you in civil engineering, this is a popular one. A bunch of stuff. Feel free to come in here and take a look at it. Which, if those of you who don't have Mathcad yet, you can download from PTC's website for free, and you have a 30-day trial of the full version of Mathcad. And after 30 days, you get an express version, which is free, which can do a lot of the stuff that I'm showing you right now. There might be some programming features that are not included, but you can do some basic stuff in here for free, and that's always nice. Documentation is the next topic. Well, as you've noticed, I've already been adding a little bit of labels during our demonstration, but I happen to have that other example here, which is documenting everything as far as this engineering worksheet goes. Okay, and that's always best practice. But you can come in here and change the look and feel if you'd like. If I wanted to come in here and underline that particular one, you know, if I wanted to center it or highlight it, you know, change the look and feel, change the font. You have some basic word processing tools that you have to manipulate the look and feel of the document. And that, I think, is one of the more popular aspects of Mathcad, is the documentation piece of it. And let's talk about integration with Excel. So there's 3 different ways that you can integrate with Excel, and there's pros and cons to each. So the first way would be to open up Excel, draw a pick box around your data, copy, and you come back into Mathcad and you hit paste. And this, what it does, it creates a table or a matrix inside of Mathcad right away, which is great. And depending on your perspective on how you wanted it to behave, this may be a pro or a con, but there's no link to Excel. It's static information. If the Excel data were to change, it does not automatically update Mathcad. You just did a simple copy and paste. If you wanted to make those same changes, you would have to come in here and make those same changes into into Mathcad. The second method would be to use this read Excel function, where you could browse to a document that's already created in Excel. By default, it will pick the entire range of data, but you can specify the rows and the columns. And when you hit enter, it'll bring in the Excel data as a table into Mathcad. The benefit is it's now linked. If I were to make changes in Excel, it will propagate those changes into Mathcad, which is great if that's your intent. The negative is now you need to maintain 2 files. So now I need to maintain this Mathcad file and I need to maintain the Excel file where the source file that it's coming from. The third method would be to use the Excel component. What the Excel component does is it brings Excel into our Mathcad worksheet. So we can specify inputs and outputs, but if I were to manipulate the cell, if I were to double click on the cell, it launches Excel, the tool. So if I were to, you know, put in some data, and then close it, you're manipulating the data within Mathcad. using Excel. So pros and cons, just like the other methods. The benefit is I have it all in one file. You know, as long as you have a license of Excel, license of Mathcad, you can use it. You just double click on the cell and it launches Excel in its own window. The negative is now it's a larger file size. So maybe it's a little larger depending on your data set. Maybe I can't email it anymore. I might need to use another avenue to share this worksheet, like FTP site, for example, or Dropbox, you know, in order to share this data. So again, we might have a webinar in the future on just integrating with Excel. We could talk for a long time just on this portion of it, but use the right tool for the right job. Use Excel to capture the data, and then use Mathcad to manipulate it into calculations if needed. Okay? As mentioned, you do have the ability to integrate Mathcad into Creo or into SolidWorks, where you know, depending on the engineering calculations, the actual design can change, and so that's very popular, and that might be a future webcast as well. Okay, let's see what else we got in here. Oh, there's a bunch of worksheets that are already created for us, you know, depending on what category you're in. And I've got this link here. If you're interested, send me an email. I'll have my email address at the end of this. But if you're interested in electrical engineering or mechanical engineering, there's a bunch of worksheets that are already created in here that you can utilize. Maybe tweak some of those values to fit your needs. Massage it a little bit. Okay. Anything that has a little plus sign uses the Mathcad Premium features. Otherwise, a lot of these are Express compatible. So there's a lot of good topics in here for you to come in here and explore. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. A lot of this stuff is already done for you. They also have some worksheets that you could purchase if you like. These are all free, but if you wanted access to, you know, Rourke's formula for stress and strain translated into Mathcad, they do have that available as well. You just might need to purchase a library subscription. If you're interested, let us know. We can send you more information on that. For those of you who have Mathcad, previous versions of Mathcad, you cannot open up Mathcad 14 or 15 files directly into Mathcad Prime. You're going to have to run it through the converter. Well, this converter uses 2 licenses. So you would need to have Mathcad 15 installed, and I think it needs to be a certain date code as well, like MO10 or MO20. Let me know and I'll verify that for you. And you would need to, so with one license, if my license file is good for Prime 3.1, I can install that version or any version before it. So even though you didn't have Mathcad 15, let's say you're on Mathcad 14, you have to install Mathcad 15, but your license file is good. Some of you guys might only have one license available. So here's the workaround. If you only have one license available, close Mathcad and start the converter from the install location. So you're launching the converter.bat file, and it's only going to use one license to launch Mathcad 15 to convert it. So here's the location of where that converter is located. If you need any assistance on getting this to work, let me know, and we can jump on another go-to meeting to see if we can get this stuff converted. I wanted to talk about this briefly. Mathcad 15 is still supported. A lot of people are sitting in Mathcad 15 right now until all of the features in Mathcad 15 have made it into Prime 4.0 or Prime, any version of Prime. It might not be Prime 4.0. So if most of the things have made it into Prime, but if you were doing any of those custom controls or custom DLL scripts, you might want to stay at Mathcad 15 until you know that it's in Prime. Prime does fit the needs for most of our users out there, but Mathcad 15 is still supported. It's still on, you know, if you're on maintenance, it's still supported, but there's no R&D going into Mathcad 15 anymore. It's all going into Mathcad Prime. If you have any questions, we do have a chat window located in the GoToMeeting client. Let me go check that real quick. Doesn't look like we have any questions, but if you do, go ahead and type them into the message window. And I don't plan on covering anything else. If you have no questions, I really appreciate you guys joining us today, and I'll stay on the line for a couple of minutes to make sure that everybody's questions have been answered. Thanks, guys.